It's a pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. This is the topic of making meetings magic. Something over 40% of meetings produce nothing as a result, so it's vital, this topic. Jim Hetherton, I've known and loved for many years, a real guru on personal productivity. So he will guide us through our session. Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Bob, my wonderful assistant. He'll be doing the chat and all of that. So good morning, welcome. Thank you for investing in your skill set to make your meetings magic. So if you haven't done so already, I'd like you to change the setting on the chat. I think Bob mentioned that. Whenever I think of the word magic, Disney, this place comes to mind. And in the chat box, tell us, have you ever been to a Disney theme park? Ever been to a Disney theme park? Number of yeses? No, no, yes, okay. For those of you who haven't, think about people that you've spoken to that have. The one in France, the Euro Disney, yeah, okay. Excellent, we've got quite a few Disney theme parks are interesting for a number of reasons. Now, for those of you who said yes, who went to any of the Disney theme parks, this next question, would you return and why? Would you return and why? Even been on a Disney cruise? Oh, I bet that was interesting. How did they manage to do the helter skelter and some of the rides on a Disney cruise? How does that work? Maybe we can chat offline. But if you would you return? Yeah?
Yes, because it's a special place. Yes, because it's fun. Customer service was outstanding. Yes, great atmosphere. I'll tell you later, Jim. No,
okay.
Too busy to go. It's magical,
okay.
even without the children.
All right. So we've got some positive comments there in terms of fun, customer service, the experience. Now, like anything else, including meetings, this place and meetings doesn't happen by magic. It's one of my favorite four-letter words. It's called work. And as they do the basics, some of the research, and this guy built his empire on this statement. So think about that in relation to the delegates in your meetings. Are you doing those meetings so well that they go away screaming and shouting and say, that's the best thing since sliced bread, that was a magical event and you need to come to Bob's meetings, etc. Are they or are they not? It'd be interesting to audit. Now, Disney, they work on the VIP principle, and you're all familiar with VIP, but their VIP is a very individual person. And the personalized experience is what they're all about. They're into, firstly, how do we want people to feel as a result of the experience at a Disney resort? And these are just a few of the behaviors that they want to get the cast members, because that's what the employees are called, the cast members, to imbued with the guests. And that's what they call their customers at Disney. To be welcomed and acknowledged, really important in a meeting, whether it be virtual, and we'll talk about virtual meetings as opposed to face-to-face meetings, but a lot of the basic principles do work, although we've got to change it with the platforms, with the virtual environment. And so they want to be safe and they want to be happy. Now, I'm not quite sure as a meeting leader if I'm always consciously focused on the happiness of my attendees in the meetings, but the safety is critical. If you're going to have, as a meeting leader, honest, candid, truthful, transparent conversation, not dialogue, not the monologue rather, but dialogue, then we need to make the environment safe. We don't want to have the meeting after the meeting syndrome kicking in. So it's a leadership issue to be able to create the environment where all of the meeting attendees really do feel safe and hopefully happy. That they've heard, that they've been heard. Nothing more frustrating than walking away from a meeting feeling that your point just wasn't heard at all. People were not listening. Now, there is a two-way communication. We need another day to be able to get into that. But the other thing that Disney, they want people to walk away feeling enriched in some way, shape, or form. And I think that that's a leadership mantra for all of us, to be able to think about and how we organize and design the meetings, and particularly more due diligence, more planning and preparation has got to go into our online meetings so that we can keep the engagement, because there is an issue with regards to Zoom fatigue. Yes, it's a real thing, and I'll discuss that a little bit later on for you. But as we look at exceptional customer service, because one of the things that typically they score very highly on at Disney is service. And they don't talk about good customer service, they talk about exceptional customer service. And they regularly gain feedback. I'll talk about the process of evaluation. But very quickly at Disney, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being really exceptional customer service to 1 not really very good, poor at the other end of the scale, they get regular feedback, and that proves, and some of your businesses also have feedback mechanisms, I hope, maybe the Net Promoter Score process, which has some wonderfully crafted questions. And if you're not familiar with those, give me a note or Bob a note, and we'll give you some more information on the NPS scores. But here, let me ask you to, in the chat box, answer this question. As a meeting leader, right now, today, be honest with us, how would you, on a scale of 1 to 5, where would you rate yourself? Exceptional, 5, or less so? Where would you put yourself? 1 to 5, please. Okay, I'm not going to embarrass anybody with the actual scores. Don't have, okay. So we got 2s, 3s, 4s. Always can improve. Yes, thank you, Brenda. That's absolutely right. That's the biggest room in the world, a room for improvement. So we need to
2.5 there, Jim.
2.5. Okay, all right. Let's see if we can creep it up to 3 as a result of today. Wherever you are on the scale, whether it be 4, we don't have anybody getting into 5s here, so none of it is in denial. Nobody is perfect, and Disney don't position themselves as being perfect, but what they do strive for constantly, continuous improvement. And the only way that you can do that is ask the question. So the litmus test for me is not only for you to evaluate, but if I was, or if you, I challenge you to go away from this webinar and ask that question to the people that attend your meetings. On a scale of 1 to 5, where would you put me? And why? Get the feedback, and then you can make the changes, because this is vitally important. Millions and millions and millions of meetings will be held in this country today. Over 450. One day I'm going to find out who do this research. They do some wonderful research. 450 million years worth of meetings every single day. Now, sadly, the research also indicates that 52% of those meetings are not really adding value because they don't even have an agenda. Now, let's talk about agendas very briefly. Now, you all know the basics here with regards to agendas. Got a quick poll question for you. Is how many of you in the chat box have ever had to go to a meeting that did not, underscore, did not have a pre-distributed agenda? Yes or no? Have you ever had to go to a meeting that did not have a pre-distributed agenda? Many, many, many. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. So we've all been to meetings without having the agenda. Okay. I will chat with you later. Okay. Talk to me. And so too many. Right. So what's the purpose of the agenda? Well, it's obviously to help us to be efficient, to be effective, to be productive in the meeting. We can prepare if we have the agenda. So how productive can you be in a meeting you're not prepared for? Kind of an obvious response to that. we're not going to be as efficient and effective. Now, I get it. There are going to be the odd crisis moments where you just need to, in the spur of the moment, pull people together. Walter, Richard, Bob, we've got this crisis. Our process in the next half an hour in this meeting is to come up with some creative solution to fix X. Now, occasionally that happens, but even in the crisis moment, focusing in on stop, breathe, think about what we're really all about. So the core element to really make it really work for us is to, I challenge you from this day, henceforth and forever. How long is that? That's a rhetorical question, team. Obviously, my challenge to you is that you will never lead, or you will never attend another meeting that does not have a pre-distributed agenda. Oh, Jim, do you really mean that? Yes, I do mean it absolutely sincerely. If you want meetings to magically disappear out of your life and your diary, don't go if they don't have the agenda. Yeah, I know it's difficult, but who? We're going to have some time in the at the back of the webinar to be able to discuss some of these. But listen, it's vitally important, as particularly the meeting leader, that you set the environment up. Okay. So again, some of you have been on the webinars previously. I want you to be wise. Wisdom is knowledge correctly applied. It's not what you know, it's what you do with what you know. A lot of this is common sense, but it's not common practice. 52% out there need this stuff. Now, I'm excited and challenged, excited to be able to share with you tips, tools, and ideas over the last 30, 40 years, which I know from my own personal experience and observation and coaching at executive board level, right down to middle management and junior levels. This stuff works, but it only works if you work it. Okay. For normal people, this would be a full day of training and education on this topic. For intelligent people, I could probably do it in 4 hours. You guys have got 45 minutes, so you know where you are. So listen, hopefully you've got something to take some notes on. Hopefully you'll be able to capture that digitally or old school, whatever you like. All about your light bulb, not necessarily note down what I say or what somebody else comes up with, but more importantly, what you think. Apply it to you right now. I like that idea, Jim. Capture that thought. How can I develop that, build on it, change it, make it personal to you, to your team, to your family, to your organization, whatever the ideas may be. As you know, we got some bonuses. We'll come back at the end, and one of them is the more of a telephone conversation where we can get into a little bit more of a deep dive on some of these. So we've got a poll. So let me ask you, from your own life experience, let me launch this poll. And I want you to choose 5 of these. So let's see where we go with the poll. You've got 10 typical issues that come up, which people in surveys have said these are the perennial issues that make our meetings really poor or non-magical, as we're referring it to today. So we've got, how many? We've got 25. Okay, give it another.
%45 voted.
Oh yeah, 60. We'll give it till it gets over the 80% mark, please. If you haven't voted, choose 5 now.
Poor preparation. Too long.
Interesting.
We drift from the agenda.
Yeah, help me with this, Bob, in terms of making sure I've got the top 5 here.
Sure, absolutely.
So
lack of listening.
Another 5 seconds, please.
79% voted. 81%. Okay, I'll end the polling.
All right, end the poll.
Share the results. There we go.
There we go. Okay, good. So let's have a quick look at this. So poor preparation. And And what's the next one there, Bob? Is that
I'd say too long. Yeah, too long.
Too long. Okay.
Yeah. Drift from the agenda, lack of listening, and minimal participation. I'd say they're the top 5 looking at them.
Okay.
They're all on that screen.
Excellent, team. So, proper prior planning prevents poor performance or prevents non-magical meetings. So what is proper and prior planning and organization? I've got a couple of slides and thoughts around that for you. In terms of the lengths, we'll look at the control mechanisms that need to be in place. Yeah, so lack of the engagement and the participation element, critical when we get into the execution of the strategy, of the plan, to have a magical meeting. And that's interesting in terms of technologies. So, that's interesting. Okay, thank you for your participation in that. So let's come back to, how do I get rid of that? Okay, good. Nope. All right, go away. Sorry, technology, talking about technology. Here we go. So making meeting magic. There are 3 core things that I want for us to walk away with. And again, this is not rocket science to us. We've heard this before. We've been around the houses. But the issue is it a habit? Is it a protocol? Is it something that we do routinely to be able to create and then execute meetings that really are fit for purpose and give us and the participants in the organization the results that it's actually after? So the planning, the doing, and the reviewing. Let's have a look at this. I love the carpenter's motto. When we look about planning and preparation, some of you are familiar with the carpenter's motto: measure twice, cut once. So in that planning and preparation, it really is key, and it's interesting and encouraging, or sadly in some ways, that we've all had that same experience, that this lack of preparation comes out. So a bit of an observation around really high performance individuals and professions. High quality, high performance barristers or lawyers are investing a huge amount of time for every hour in front of the judge and the jury in court. Likewise, professional speakers, again, an inordinate amount of time in practice and rehearsal in front of that group. So my rhetorical question to you is this: if I was to audit your diary, would I actually see blocked out time for meeting preparation? Or is it on a to-do list? You see, a goal is a dream with a deadline, but a goal not written down in the diary is just a wish. And it's that aspect of time management, as it were, making that commitment in the diary that can make all of the difference in getting that high priority task done. Because we'll talk about getting the return on the investment, because if you're tying 10 people up in a meeting for 1 hour, just the financial implications alone can be quite enormous, let alone if it's the 10 executive team members or board members. So that preparation will be absolutely key. So write it down in the diary, make it a commitment, because again, going back to my 4-letter word, work will win where wishy-washy wishing won't. There's a bit of tongue twister there. So think about these key questions. First key question I have to ask us all to revisit, well, there's 2 actually. The first one is, well, why having a meeting in the first place? And then the ROI. So really getting a key focus on the answer to that question. And I mean, as the old Spice Girls song says, tell me what you want, what you really, really want. Well, in terms of meetings, is it really, really necessary? If the answer is yes, for the purpose that I wish to achieve, then you get to pass go and you can move on to the next stage of preparing your organ. But can I do this another way? Can I get the answer to this information via email, polling, or Slack, or WhatsApp, or whatever. Can I do it some other way rather than actually call a meeting? So if it is, great, then we can go on to the next stage and understand that the processes and tools that you will use in various meetings will vary to the purpose of the meeting. The reason why we're actually, if it's a decision-making meeting, is it just a comfort blanket that you're needing? Or should you just actually, as a leader, make the decision and not call the meeting, potentially? Something you're procrastinating on. Or maybe it's part of the relationship building. You want to be a more collaborative. Then there are different tools. If a strategic planning meeting, you might use different tools like SWOT, S-W-O-T. Some of you are familiar with those. If you're not, let us know. Or PEST. Various tools. If it's a creative problem solving, maybe it's mind mapping, or Ishigawa, the fishbone technique, the implications, the effects, and so forth. So various tools that we have in our management and leadership tool bag will drive some of the discussions here. But understand, so what is the purpose? Typically, again, in leadership and management, you're going to have what I call the hierarchy of meetings, from the strategic down to the tactical. And I've got a couple of tips and ideas of how we can tweak all of these. But again, essentially, what are we doing before? What are we doing in the meeting? What are we doing after the meeting? Will be the backbone to everything that we are going to discuss here. So if we're clear about the purpose, yes, we do need to have the meeting occasionally. I wouldn't say every time, but it really is a useful exercise to do a cost-benefit analysis. It's the old opportunity cost idea. If you tie 10 people up in a meeting, the opportunity cost of that is that they've lost the opportunity to be able to work on other stuff, obviously. So are we getting a return on the investment? Now, I know that this is sometimes a challenge to be able to get our heads around, because there are two things. Talking to my son at the weekend about this topic, who works in cybersecurity at BT, he was saying that sometimes it's really a challenge to think about the primary and the secondary impacts or issues of a particular problem that they've got in BT. I mean, a secondary issue, for example, might be reputational damage to the business if they don't fix this particular problem. So I do understand that it is sometimes a bit of a challenge, but if you've never done it, it is an eye-opening exercise to be able to do the cost-benefit analysis here. So the number of participants, say we've got 10 people tied up, we kind of know their hourly rate. So thank you, Peter, for that. Look at the direct costs, and then on top of that, typically the research is about 40%, and that will give us an indication. And what I've got, if you haven't got this sort of Excel spreadsheet, Bob and I have got a number of these already worked out for you, so you don't need to waste a lot of gray cells. We can send it to you. But it's here that you can quickly identify 10 people for 2, 3, 4 hours or whatever it is, it's going to cost X. You see, the problem is that too often we hold the £500 meeting to solve a £100 problem. And again, in Disney, when they do this, because they are charged as leaders and managers within the business, if you can just get rid of the problem without having to have the meeting, and you do the cost benefit analysis, sign the check, get rid of it, rather than have the £500 meeting. So what we're after again is that return on the investment. So it does have financial implications in ineffective meetings, but tell me from your experience here in the chat box, what might be some of the other costs or implications of ineffective or non-magical meetings? From your own life experience and observation, please. I just grab a drink. Anybody got any thoughts? Morale, demotivators. Yeah, people get demotivated, disengaged. Okay. High value, low morale, no decisions made, raise more questions than the answer, confusion, thank you, yes. Negativism, mindset is everything. Oh, and by the way, you've got to sign on for next week's webinar. We got Tom Ziegler, proud son of legendary Zig Ziglar, who's going to be on the webinar next week. We're super excited about that, aren't we, Bob? And so lack of respect for management. Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah. Our reputational damage can cause dissension. Ooh, that's a painful sounding implication there. So thank you, Peter and Laurie, etc. So lots of damage can be done here. Not only the financial implications, but that emotional, psychological damage as well. So first question: do we really need a meeting? If yes, move on. We've done the ROI. Then who is doing what by when? I quickly want to run over the key roles. Now, an interesting question to ask is not only who needs to be there, but who's not going to be there. Some of the key roles, there is one occasionally, which is a facilitator. If you've got a really high jugular topic where you need a neutral voice in the room to be able to steer some of the emotional conversations, the facilitator who has skills and trained to be able to facilitate meetings can really help there. But anyway, let me quickly go through some of the key roles here and see from your own experience if these have been attended to. So obviously very self-explanatory. Establish ground rules, I'll come back to that in a minute. But as we look particularly the meeting leader in these COVID days here, you know, the issue, particularly if you're going to continue to or start to come out of lockdown and go into more face-to-face meetings, you've got some implications in terms of space, ventilation, sanitization. So there are some particular issues that we've got to rethink about how we run face-to-face, and there'll always be a case to run those. But also in our Zoom meetings, the virtual platforms, Zoom fatigue is a real thing. Now, I've got a couple of papers. I can't spend a lot of time on this, but if you're interested in getting more energy, be able to, I was talking to one group, in fact, yesterday, who had spent the whole day on Zoom. I mean, literally 8 hours on Zoom. Now, the challenge that we have is our brains have working memory, which is very limited. And when we're having to concentrate on all of the faces, and we're having to concentrate on one of those faces, which is looking at ourselves all day, can be very stressful. And it is energy draining. It's what's referred to by psychologists today as Zoom fatigue. It's a real thing. There are some tips and ideas in this paper. If you're interested, I can send that to you. So this is how we communicate and interact with the world in a really ultra safe environment, but there are some downsides to it, and you've got to manage it a little bit differently than what you would do in terms of what I call the choreographing of meetings. So establishing all of that sort of stuff. So the meeting leader really does get involved in not only the pre and the execution of the meeting, but also controlling what I call airtime. You'll always have in any particular body your extroverts and your introverts, and the meeting leader or the facilitator, or hopefully all of the attendees, can be more aware of both of the elements of making sure that we are more inclusive of our, particularly so the more introvert personality types. Always driving for who is doing what by when in terms of the chairperson. Timekeeper is an interesting one. Now, in my experience, I don't know about yours, it'd be interesting. Tell me in the chat box quickly, who usually in your experience plays the role of timekeeper? Let's have a look. Who usually plays timekeeper? Yeah, chairperson. Chair, yeah, the meeting leader. Now, I would suggest that's a big mistake. Big mistake to have the timekeeper also double up, multitask as the meeting leader. Why? Because the meeting leader typically gets so involved in the content, they forget about time. So the suggestion is, from my observation and life experience, that you have somebody who is very assertive, who is willing to speak up, because if you've got a well-planned, timed agenda, and I'll talk about that in a second, then they basically keep people aware of time. Look, team, we've only got 2 minutes left on this topic. What are we going to do? Okay, maybe also keeps a note, 45 minutes max there. In particularly online meetings, there needs to be regular, you'll notice the way that I'm manipulating the chat and trying to keep engagement and participation. Every 6 to 9 minutes, that has to happen, or else you're going to get disengagement, people will go away, you'll lose them. And so regular soft breaks, like a chat that I've just used, is what we call a soft break. Hard breaks, maximum 45 minutes, you need a hard break so people can go away from the laptop for 10 minutes, go and refresh themselves, do what they need to do, then come back and be rejuvenated. So there's that comfort monitor element as well, I think is critical role. The recorder. Now, obviously, everybody's going to take care of their own actions, but the recorder is summarizing who is doing what by when. And hopefully, again, it's somebody separate who can do this. Doesn't need to be shorthand, but it definitely needs to be a quick summary of the actions of who is doing what by when. We don't need Hansard. That's for members of Parliament. They create a book, and every word that the MP speaks in the House of Parliament is recorded in Hansard. That's not what I'm talking about. They're just making sure that every 15 minutes, team, we just discussed X and we've decided that so-and-so is doing so-and-so. Is that, did I get that right? And so without editing, without paraphrasing, they try to capture in the essence in the moment. And then more importantly, the gold standard is that those action points are coming out to everybody if it's needed within 24 hours. So everybody knows very clearly who is doing what by when. Obviously, we're all participants, and just a brief list of various things there. Sometimes there are, keeping an open mind is leaving our ego at the door, as it were, is sometimes a bit of a challenge for all of us, but we all need to work on that. And be, I suppose in summary, be fully present in the moment, in the meeting. And as I say, that's why choreographing the preparation, particularly for the virtual meetings, is so key, so that we can keep our energy up and be able to get the best out of people's brains here. So creating the objectives, so get the key roles out of the way. What are our objectives? Now, Stephen Covey, as some of you know, was a mentor of mine for many years. Second habit of highly effective people: they begin with the end in mind. They have a clear picture, a clear vision on paper, again, of what that meeting looks like, sounds like, feels like. What does success look like for this meeting? Because everything is created twice. The mental or the psychological creation precedes the physical creation. Richard Locke, our esteemed colleague, with regards to planning and preparation of effective online or presentation skills, that aspect of preparation is absolutely vital. One of the ways that we need to make sure that our objectives are as specific and measurable as possible. The law of specificity states, and if you've got false teeth, you've got a problem with that one, but the law of specificity states that when we deal with specifics, we rarely fail. When we deal with generalities, we rarely succeed. So we've got to be a meaningful specific. And one way that I've found to be able to help us with that is completing this sentence. So at the end of the meeting, we will, what is it? And as an example, there you go. Over the next 6 months, we're going to reduce the advertising, but et cetera, et cetera. So more active verbs in that purpose statement for the meeting, not just a general come to the meeting and let's discuss budgets, etc. Not as specific and measurable enough. So do the due diligence, and that can really focus people's attention prior to the meeting so that they can be more productive and effective. So how many discussion points should you have? Well, there is no particular measuring rod on this. Again, it depends on the purpose, the involvement, the amount of people in the meeting, etc. But there is a general rule here. I used to say a rule of thumb. Then I found out what the general rule of thumb meant, and now I don't say that now. Some of you are distracted. What does the general rule of thumb mean? If you're interested, I'll send it to you later. But the numbers on this are interesting. in terms of the discussion points. Look at the numbers on this. If you've got 2 or 3, but as soon as you start going up from that, it's the law of diminishing returns. And so in the architectural metaphor plays well into the meeting management area as well. Less is more. Seriously, folks, really be disciplined here. Our eyes are often bigger than our belly, as it were. And so we try to cram too much in either a face-to-face or particularly on a virtual platform. Literally, the mantra has got to be less is more. Okay, so think about that so that you can have happy people walking out of the meetings here. Timings are critical. Timings are critical. I'm going to share with you some ideas here in terms of do they start, and for me, more importantly, possibly, is do they stop? Do they end on time? So in terms of meetings not starting on time, it is a sign of disrespect, lateness, tardiness. I remember a quick war story many years ago in an oil company, and I was talking about, tardiness, late comers to meetings, and the senior executive, she said, I never have a problem with tardiness in my meetings. And I said, really, why? And she said, well, if somebody comes into the meeting late with no good reason, and sometimes there are good reasons, they have to answer a question out of my book. And I said, interesting strategy. Sorry, what's the book all about? She said, it's called The 101 Questions About Sex You Dare Not Ask. Nobody's ever late. Anyway, so if you incentivize or maybe penalize people for tardiness, I don't care what it is, but typically you need to start meetings on time. Sorry, I missed one there. Just in the chat box, tell me, do your meetings typically start on time? What do you think, team? Typically, in your experience, do they start on time? By and large, yes. Yeah, mostly, yes. Okay, excellent. I wish. Mostly 75%. Okay. Depends on the culture. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Typically, I've found, and it's great to be able to see that. I hope that you maintain that. But if it is a cultural issue that, oh, Bob's meetings, they always start 10 minutes late. I'm actually going to sit at my desk and do some productive work rather than just chewing the fat for 10 minutes, buying a coffee pot, waiting for Bob to... Sorry, Bob, I'm only joking, of course. I know that you would never do that. But the issue is it's sometimes a culture, and it's not an acceptable culture. Meetings need to start on time. And if you're going to change that culture, then you get there 10 minutes before and you start the meeting. And if nobody shows up, 5-10 minutes into that meeting, you abort the meeting. Yeah, I'm serious about that. Tell me, in terms of where have you seen this on the agenda? Where does this come on your agenda typically? You know what it means? Yeah, that. Yeah, where's it come? In your experience? Yeah, last item on the agenda at the end. AOB actually stands for that. Any old baloney. This is the opportunity for Negative Nell, Awkward George, who have not done the preparation because the meeting leader didn't share the preparation, possibly. If you're guilty of that one, then no more of that, please. But this is the opportunity that drags on and on and on the agenda here. And so there's a couple of strategies. First and foremost, in some organizations, if it's not on the agenda, there is no other business. Okay, that's an interesting one. For me, that's a little too radical. What I would recommend, team, within the last 24, 48 hours, or the time between now and when we last met, is there anything, this comes number one item on the agenda, is there anything that we need to know about? Then itemize it, prioritize it, time it, and then at the end of the meeting, not going to say, right, is there any other? Now at the end of the meeting, to way of guillotining the waffle, then you can go through, right, what for our next meeting? That's a much more efficient way, I have found, of being able to get people move. Likewise, with regards to the technique of the car park. And if you're not familiar with the car park, this is where you've got a well-planned agenda, amount of minutes allocated to each agenda item, but there's something that comes out of left field or comes out. It's a rich vein of discussion, but not for the purpose of this forum or this meeting. And so you stick it on a post-it note or whatever, somebody makes a note of it, and it goes in the car park and it's discussed at a future time. So that's a great tool to be able to think about. Now, the other thing that I would ask to get you to think about in terms of creativity is timings. Why do meetings have to start on the hour? Yeah, if I had my way with this one, it wouldn't start at 11 o'clock. It would start at a couple of minutes past 11. Just make it different, because guess what? And I've tried this over the last 30, 40 years. Jim, why did you say the meeting is starting at 10:06? Well, you're here at 10:06 because people remember it, because it's a little bit different. So I really would encourage you. I mean, who was the committee that came up that meetings have got to start on the hour and got to last an hour? I wasn't involved. I wasn't communicated. Urgency, building urgency into your agenda items, into your meetings. If you've got, for example, about a 1 hour meeting, naturally talk about the physiology, the biology of the human being. When would be classically a good time during the day to be able to hold that probably 1 hour meeting? Well, an hour before lunch, an hour before home time. Yeah. So think about your timings, because they can make a critical difference. For those of you who like a template, if you haven't got this, we can send this to you, a generic template. And it takes a lot of that preparation, pre-thought, formatting out of the way. You just fill in the blanks. So you've got those particular elements, start and stop times. You'll notice on that one, schedule and actual. Have you ever noticed sometimes, teams, there is a difference between schedule and actual when you actually evaluate how long that actually takes? And that can be useful feedback for yourself and for others as well. So occasionally, maybe the costs as well. You're going to put in there your review items, and then you put in your agenda items. So again, you'll notice here that I have set up this agenda when we have got all of the participants in the room. We've refocused everybody's attention on the purpose. And if they have not done the due diligence, if they have not done the preparation for the meeting, abort the meeting. Yes, you heard me right. Abort the meeting. Because nothing more depressing than getting into a meeting where 80% of people have done the due diligence, and then we're sat there for another couple of colleagues. Oh, sorry, I didn't get a chance to read the brief here. Can we spend 20 minutes just going through it? Don't allow it to happen, folks, really, seriously. So if you're going to make magic meetings happen, you've got to be more disciplined in terms of those things. Mention Zig Ziglar and his fabulous son, Tom, who's going to share with us next week. So bring friends, tell everybody. There's going to be a superstar amongst our midst next week. And we're really super excited to have Tom share his latest thinking from the Ziglar organization on creating a victory mindset during the toughest and challenging times. So please tell others about next week's webinar. So let's have a look at ground rules. Ground rules. Tell me, in your experience, do you have them? Do you use them? In the chat box, please. Do you have them? Do you use them? Sometimes yes, no, yes, we have them. Okay, 100%, absolutely good. Okay, only verbally. Interesting. I'm going to come back to that, making them more particular. Again, these really work very, very well. So having some ground rules where the team has come up with the ground rules. These are the rules, the interactions of the team has collaborated together to be able to engage with. And it's having them and making sure that they are enforced in the meeting. For example, this is my example of a couple of things that would appear on that. So let me just give you a couple of seconds to have a read of that. So again, some fairly self-explanatory stuff there, and getting to being totally candid, open, and honest That's one of the areas of participant engagement that we talked about. Honoring the absentee. Again, I love what Stephen Covey refers to this. If you're going to keep integrity and respect with the people who are present, remember, no backstabbing or backbiting around the people who are not in the room. Honor the absentee. There's a whole nother webinar about that. But stand-up meetings, more efficient, more effective, more magical. It's not a new idea. It's a very old idea. In fact, it goes back many, many years. This is the Queen down at Buck House. Every month, part of the government called the Privy Council have literally, as you can see, a stand-up meeting with Her Majesty. It goes back to the days of Victoria when she had these long, boring meetings. I think it was Albert who came up with, take the chairs away, make them stand up. And of course, the old fogies walked into the meeting, oh, there's no chairs, let's keep it quick. And it reduced the meeting time very significantly. Said, that's a good idea, let's continue to do that. And so stand-up meetings evolved. Sitting is the new smoking. Even on webinars, virtual, I really, really encourage you to stand up more. Breathing is important. I find it helpful personally. Breathing, you think differently, you can problem solve differently, you've been more assertive, and you've got more energy on your feet than you are sat down. So think about some of the geography here, the choreography rather, daily huddles, for example, or weekly management meetings, all facilitated with this energy boost of standing up rather than sitting down. It's typically the agenda item for those huddles, those stand-up meetings. My friend down in Brighton, Graham Alcott, and his wonderful organization, Think Productive, the Productivity Ninja Group. This is their daily huddles. They have them virtually, and they all encourage to stand up for them. And it's a good template, I think. So firstly, build a little rapport relationship with the group, sharing your big frog for the day. What's that hardest task? Get some, you put your ego out there, you've got to deal with X, and making that public commitment can often facilitate your action to accomplish that. Is there anything difficult on the horizon for you today? Maybe a bit of help and support from some of the other colleagues in that particular team works very well. And then just agreeing, are we okay for tomorrow? So different ways of being able to get the participation. Talking of which, the level of participation typically in meetings goes something like this. You've got 20% of your group have over 80% of the air time in the meeting. So we've got nearly 80% who are very little in terms of participation, or zero, 40% at zero participation. Now, I don't know whether you can relate to this. In fact, just tell us in the chat, in your experience, if you can relate to this, why does this happen? What are some of the reasons that we've got little to no participation from a large number of people in the room? In the chat box. Different characters as in personalities, the introvert, the extrovert. Yes, that will play into that. More socially dominant people, yeah, not prepared could be a big issue there. Thank you, Brenda. Looking at being worried to say something wrong, asking a stupid question. Look, the only stupid question is the one that you don't ask, okay? But yeah, we don't want to look stupid. Because if you're sat there daring to speak, not knowing each other well enough, the relationship, the feeling of trust, interesting, thank you, yeah. That kind of too tired from all day meeting, yeah, absolutely, the biological impacts there, thank you for that. So in the survey research we've done on this topic here, first item on the list is people don't feel safe. That's the leadership element. We're creating the environment where it's okay to be totally honest. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is what we're after here. Because often what happens there is you have the meeting, the proverbial elephant in the room syndrome, and nobody is discussing the elephant in the room. But they do discuss it. but they discuss it outside, either by the coffee pot, by the water cooler. Oh, you know, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. Jim said this, Jim said that. And those ideas which are freely shared outside in a safe environment are what the team or the organization actually needs to move stuff forward. So it is a massively important, because the trust is the one thing that changes everything. And we've got to find ways of being able to develop that trust. A technique which I love to be able to help us to do this is, imagine you're driving in the car down the road and it's green light, but then it changes to yellow or amber. And then automatically, what do most of us do? Yes, we speed up. So we don't want to stop at the red light. But in meetings, we have the same mentality, sadly. Something is said or not said, and you sense it. And what we need to get in the habit of doing is slowing down for the yellow or the amber light. And being able to articulate in a tactful way, something like, you know, Bob, I heard what you're saying a few minutes ago, and I have a bit of a concern. Can I just express that to you? Please, you sense it, you feel it. A good way is to just stop and articulate in a candid way and state the concern, the confusion, the potential problem. Slow down. So we talked something about planning and preparation, the execution. I want to just quickly review something about evaluation. So tell me, in the chat box again, team, has this happened? Within the last month, did the meeting leader do some sort of evaluation with you? Or you as the meeting leader, have you done some evaluation? Yes, oh, brilliant, excellent. Okay, we've got some, no. Anybody in the last month? Sometimes, occasionally, audit, scores out of 10 at the end of meetings. Excellent, good idea, keep that up. Okay, some of you, we've got about 50-50. I really encourage us, it doesn't need to be onerous, but it can be a really effective way, just like Disney do on a regular basis. So just before we leave the meeting, team, what are some of the things that you like, some of the things we're going to keep, some of the things we're going to change, a bit of a brainstorming on those, couple of minutes items, or you could do it online. There are a couple of examples. If you're interested, we've already got some set up for you for meeting effectiveness evaluation on SurveyMonkey or other tools I'm sure are available. But when performance is measured, performance improves. When performance is measured and reported back, the rate of improvement accelerates. So use that as a continuous way of being able to evaluate on that. So great, get some training. So we're going to wrap this up shortly, but we quickly went through these 3 critical areas to make our meetings magic. In the text box, tell me, what are some of your key takeaways? What's one thing at least that you're going to take away and do differently as a result of being with us? Thank you, team. Oh, thank you. I like that one. Get more people on webinars like this. Brilliant. Yeah, particularly next week with Tom Ziegler. That'll be amazing. Okay. Preparation is key. Have the agenda pass around. I like stand-up Zoom meetings. Please, yeah, plan better. Use the charts, the chats, assertiveness, planning. Oh, wow. We got a variety of various takeaways there. Fantastic, team. So as you know, we've got some tools and techniques that we can respond to the survey. We can share out some leading resources with you, particularly around the Zoom fatigue. We can send you those links. I noticed in the chat box, a couple of you are interested in that. And if you want that 30-minute coaching call, more than willing to have that at some stage in the next week. We do have the special offer continuing, just coming out of lockdown now, but if you're interested to bring this to your organization, to your team, for this and other training offerings, then get in contact with us, take advantage of that. So again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be able to share with you these ideas, for your time, your energy, your attention. And now, Bob, maybe we can do some Q&A.
Oh, we certainly can do some Q&A. Thank you, Jim. We had a question come in on the chat earlier on. Jim, you've mentioned some great ideas here. How do I influence upwards, as it's my boss who's got more of a problem than me.
Well, that's a perennial one. A couple of thoughts come to mind. Is you might like, because you'll get this slide deck in a PDF format, and maybe you could synthesize and train your boss, dare I say. You could say, look, we had this interesting webinar with this weirdo Jim Hetherton, and can I just share with you a couple of the key bullet points to help our meetings become more effective? I think sharing is a form of caring and influencing others, but yeah, influencing up can be a bit of a challenge. Bob, have you got any thoughts on how we could persuade? Because you're the author of Persuade, the book.
Thank you, Jim. I think example is a great teacher as well. So I think if you're responsible for a meeting for your team, then living by these principles is a beginning way to do it. Because sometimes coaching your boss can get you into trouble. So at least start it first in your own meetings for your own teams, get a momentum up, and maybe people will start talking about it. Maybe invite the boss to one of your meetings, because that means you get to run it your way, and they can demonstrate it, and that might stimulate the thought process, and then you can introduce, well, I got these ideas from Jim on this webinar.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Yeah. That's.
Thank you.
Any other questions, team? Anything that we can?
Yeah. Do put your questions in the chat box. We had another question come in. Not in the chat box. Sorry. We are getting some questions in the chat box. Could you please put your questions in the Q&A box? It's easier for us to manage. Jim, I'm still not sure how to stop 5-hour meetings.
5-hour meetings. Okay, right. Well, there's one creative idea from an organization who actually, you know, the idea, particularly going from a face-to-face to a virtual platform, I mentioned the choreography of that meeting has to be very different. And so what they did was they went to 5 1-hour meetings, actually chunking them down rather than having a 5-hour block. Now, I do get it in terms of strategic meetings. They're you know, usually those strategic planning meetings are offsite, you know, somewhere for 2, 3, or 4 more days, possibly. I always remember in a major organization where somebody said, you know, I had to go to one of your stand-up meetings, Jim. And I said, oh, really? Good. And I said, no, he said it wasn't good. And I said, why? He said it lasted for 4.5 hours. And I said, hold on a minute, what sort of a meeting was that? He said it was a strategic planning meeting. That's not a quick stand-up meeting. However, you know, the cognitive load is working memory, the biology, the physiology needs to be considered in terms of how can we be more effective with the group. And, you know, less is more. What can I say? Just think through in terms of, can we split that over a period of days rather than having it in one day? The geography as well, rather than having everybody go to the farthest point. I had a manager many years ago, he lived in Cardiff, so everybody from all 4 points of the country had to travel to Cardiff once a month. And he never offered to make it equidistant for everybody. And so there's a lot of frustration, a lot of time and resources that were used inappropriately, I thought, later on, in terms of just thinking through and being more considerate and respectful of time, people, energy, money, etc. Bob, have you got any thoughts? 5-hour meetings? Gosh, you've been in a lot, I know.
I think the critical thing is just imagine schools. You know, schools have breaks every usually 45 minutes these days, and rarely have the kind of double science lessons and French lessons we probably had in our day. So, you know, 90 minutes is a huge amount of time. 45 minutes intense brain work, then you need a break. So even if you've got to have a strategic meeting that does last all day, then you've got to find a way of breaking it up and putting in soft breaks and hard breaks. Talking about some of the stuff you have, though, with time, though, Jim, and your story about the person from Cardiff, there's another question in about cultural differences. So one of our delegates has mentioned they have colleagues in Jamaica, South America, and France, and that they view time differently. What advice do you have for when there are cultural differences on things like start times?
Right. So my go-to here is the 7 habits again. And as we think about creating win-win meetings with different cultures, seek first to understand before being understood. Think through some of the literal beliefs and cultural differences, because I found, as Bob has found, as international consultants and trainers, that yeah, absolutely, they do have a different perception about yeah, Peter, you're absolutely right, Mexicans 2 weeks later, mañana. So and it's a cultural difference. You're not going to change that. You're going to have to adapt and adjust and flex predominantly. Don't try to impose that you know, WASP type New York mentality, get it done yesterday on that. It's just not going to be effective. You're fighting upstream, I found. And so building in the space, the airtime, and respecting some of those differences is critical. We need to educate and re-educate ourselves in terms of cultural differences so that we can be better in that space. Bob, have you got any other thoughts on?
I mean, I certainly had some experiences in Ghana. I got invited out to Ghana to speak, and after the couple of days we had with the conferences, we were toured around. A lot of the companies who came to the conferences wanted to have one-to-ones with the speakers, and you know, travel was incredibly difficult. So promising to be anywhere at any one particular time once you were out of Accra was the capital was incredibly difficult. So there are cultural differences, there are physical differences, and you are fighting, you're pushing water uphill. You're fighting a really difficult battle with that, and we're trying to impose, you know, one type of culture on another. You know, be that a UK culture or an American culture or a German culture or an African culture. It's really hard. So I think you've got to be a little bit more flexible, be a little bit more creative. Maybe get some people in those cultures to be the host and to set it up, and see if the Jamaicans in Jamaica can organize it for everybody and see how they behave and what kind of principles they do. Get the Mexicans to work on it themselves rather than impose it.
And coming back to those ground rules, if you can get them to independently create those ground rules, then it just facilitates the whole thing. How are we doing on time, Bob?
We are 12:03. I've been so enjoying oops, 12:03.
Okay,
sorry team, we have a couple of unanswered questions. We'll try and pick that up in the follow-up notes. I really appreciate your love and attention. Jim, do you want to say a final goodbye?
No, thank you, team. Thank you for being so appreciative. We love these. Don't forget, next week, Tom Ziegler. Tell everybody, bring everybody. It'll be fantastic. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Bye now.
Bye now, everybody.